Welcome to the target stream for Mint Press News. I'm your host, Robert Inlakesh. As always, thank you to everyone for joining us. Since our last stream, Israel has struck Beirut, triggering a massive missile attack from Iran that led to a 15-hour battle. Yemen's Ansar Allah has now closed down the Red Sea to Israeli shipping, and Trump's weaknesses have been exposed, and Hezbollah continues to make Israel pay on the ground in southern Lebanon. So there is a lot to cover. But before we begin, the target stream is 100% viewer funded. And in the last 2 years, we were financially targeted and banned by PayPal, and our fundraisers were taken down by Indiegogo and GoFundMe. They even withheld our funds. For the next 60 days, we are looking for 300 new members to keep this news show alive. You can join Mint Press on Patreon or right here on YouTube and join our membership program. We are up against a Goliath corporate media propaganda machine, so we do need to fund an independent people's media to keep the public informed. Just so everyone is aware, we are doing these live streams every Monday and Thursday at 4 p.m. CST. So that is twice a week, and we hope to see you here for both. That being said, there has been an enormous amount that has developed. Evidently, there's a lot of propaganda going around as to who hit what and who is the victor of the latest round, they're calling it, but it's not clear that the tensions have yet ended between the Israelis and Iran after Iran imposed a red line on the Israelis. They have been talking about connecting the fronts since the ceasefire, the temporary ceasefire was agreed to with the United States. And now they've actually taken measures to ensure that that indeed does happen. And so we're seeing that a lot of propaganda is being spread right now. So this is the Wall Street Journal. They've said that Trump struggled to rein in Netanyahu's strikes on Iran. And this follows a lot of stories that have been coming out, including in Axios, where Trump apparently told Axios that he was going to ask Netanyahu not to strike Iran. And there's a lot that has sort of emerged on this topic, and we've streams. Just take this away here. So we've covered this issue in past live streams, and before we get into Iran's missile strikes on Israeli bases and what that actually looked like, the evidence that we actually have for it, Yemen entering the war, and Hezbollah, of course, on the ground and what they've been doing. It's important to touch on the notion of the Trump-Netanyahu relationship and how it's being tested and strained and all of the rest of this, because Axios News and Barak Ravid, its Israeli correspondent, was sharing the stories indicating that Trump had told Netanyahu that he's crazy and reined him in, and that the Trump administration had stopped the Israelis from striking Beirut. And if you remember what I was saying on the last episode, Israel was still going to strike Beirut, probably in a limited way. But it was most likely going to actually do that. That's exactly what has happened. And this was evident because this trick has been played a number of times. Now, the Israelis and the US work together with everything they do. So the strike that was conducted over the weekend on Beirut by the Israelis, which the Israelis said that they carried out an attack on a Hezbollah target, was evidently conducted in order to test the Iranians in their position, because Iran had previously threatened that if Israel strikes Dahia, the southern suburbs of Beirut, it will respond by striking northern occupied Palestine. Israel and its estimates were that the Iranian response wouldn't be too heavy, and therefore it wouldn't really lead to any massive clash. The problem is they took that risk, and to save face, because Netanyahu needed to attack Dahia, to save face, the Trump administration evidently coordinated this. Now, the media tries to make out as if this is a move that was pulled off without the knowledge of the US. And it's clear that this is not the case, because when the Israelis threatened last week to strike Beirut and Iran then threatened to retaliate, there was a phone call between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, which was the subject of much debate and all of these stories about how Trump was, asserting himself with Netanyahu and stopped him from attacking Dahia. The reason that phone call happened is because they did not want to attack Beirut without some sort of plan and to manage the escalation ladder. So Israel went ahead and did what it wanted to do and symbolically attacked Beirut. And as a result, Iran launched a rather large ballistic missile attack. Now, some people have asked why it wasn't hundreds of ballistic missiles and why it hasn't looked like Operation True Promise 2, for example. And we'll get into that. But I think first it's best to actually look at what Iran has published and then the evidence of targets that were struck. So here's some footage that Iran itself released of the missiles that were launched. And it's important to keep in mind here that the Iranians launched their missiles from a series of bases throughout the country. So the message was, and here you see that they're launching, in some cases, only a small number of missiles. And then in other cases, the batches are a little larger. But these missile strikes were launched from across the country to send a message that those bases have been dug out, recovered, that they weren't destroyed during the 40-day war that ended with a temporary ceasefire, or temporarily, I suppose, there was a cessation of hostilities, that after that, those missile bases hadn't been destroyed, that the missiles are still there. The bases are now operational. They've been dug out, and Iran has the capacity to fire from them. And again, a lot of people ask, okay, why weren't the missile waves bigger? Why didn't Iran fire 200 missiles instead of around a few dozen missiles? The answer to that is very obvious if you think about it. So here's the Iranians in Kermanshah as they see the missiles come in. Just play that. So every single night, the Iranian public, there are thousands who show up to these public demonstrations in cities throughout the country. And this is obviously their reaction as those missiles were fired in retaliation to the Israeli attack on Beirut. And so here's some footage now. We'll get into that in a second. But to answer many people's queries about why this kind of an attack occurred, it's because if Iran was to bring out hundreds of launchers from all of these bases, or it's a single base, then the US and the Israelis that were prepared and knew that an Iranian attack was coming would be able to then go after those launchers. And they could perhaps take out dozens of them as they try and rush them back into their bases. An operation like Operation True Promise 2 that was launched by the Iranians in 2024 was under different circumstances entirely. And so the threat level was not as high of them getting attacked. But in this case, there was a high chance, and there is a high chance, that those launchers can get targeted. So Iran can't just pull out, hundreds and hundreds of launchers. I mean, it could, but there is a high risk involved in doing something like that. So that is a query that a lot of people have had, and that is a very basic explanation as to why this sort of an attack happened. And we saw sirens across northern occupied Palestine and about 5 waves of these missiles. So here's some footage of those missiles entering into the airspace of northern occupied Palestine towards Israeli military bases. Now, Iran said explicitly that it targeted Ramat David, and this here, again, appears to be footage of direct hits. So there was a lot of footage that was shared that was not genuine. It was either AI or in a lot of cases, old videos. But the two hits that we have here in the following two videos, you're going to see were confirmed to have been from that batch in response to Israel's attack on Beirut.
Whoa.
And again, here's from a different angle, an Iranian missile falling on its target. And there does not appear to be any air defense that is coming up and confronting these missiles as they head towards their targets, which is very important to note. In some cases, there are air defenses that were triggered. This video, I could not independently verify. People were sharing this around. But this, again, is purported to show the attack. So here, for looking at the impact sites, so after this clip here, there's footage that emerged from an impact site that may have been an interceptor missile. It's not very clear, but here, I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. This is at Ramat David Air Base, the Israeli air base that was targeted. And by the way, the reports were coming out that eyewitnesses had seen the missiles strike at this base. And so before Iran had announced that they had targeted Ramat David Air Base, there were already reports in the Israeli media that were claiming that it was struck, just so everyone is aware. So this appears to be a warehouse here at the airbase. And we can see from the satellite imagery that was released that it has been taken out, that it was hit directly. Here is more evidence of it before and after. And that shows a direct hit. Now, Israel also decided to strike back at the Iranians. And the strikes that they committed against Tehran, Shiraz, Isfahan, and elsewhere, it's of note that according to the reports that have come out, there were no Iranian deaths. There were injuries reported, I believe 15 injuries, something to that effect. But there were not attacks on urban areas. There were attacks on businesses. There was an attack on a petrochemical plant, and they hit radar sites. And the Iranians admitted that free radar sites were targeted. The extent of the damage that the Israelis did to the Iranians, it's really not that clear. But I will note that because, again, and we're going to pull up and go back to the whole Trump-Netanyahu beef here, the claims that Netanyahu was told by Trump not to strike Iran. And yes, Donald Trump publicly announced that the firing had to stop. But that there was this, attempt by the Trump administration to stop the Israelis from striking back at Iran, and that they didn't want them to do it, and that there was this massive struggle between them. If the Israelis were acting outside of the coordination, let's say, that they have with the United States, and they weren't coordinating this with the United States, the Israelis, you would think, just rationally approaching this issue here, would have committed strikes that would have had more devastating effects and would have dragged the Iranians to another large round of confrontations and would have fought over a number of days at the very least. Now, for now, the missile fire from Iran has stopped as long as the Israelis stop their attacks against Beirut. And another condition was added from the Iranian military, the IRGC, that Israel needs to stop its attacks on the south of Lebanon as well. It needs to withdraw from the country. So this is not by any means over. But again, if the Israelis were seeking to try and drag the United States in, or were acting against the will of the Trump administration, I believe they would have struck urban areas. They're never shy to do that in any other case. What I believe has happened here is that the Israelis, coordinating with the United States to save face after the Iranian threats humiliated them and after they've failed to achieve any military objectives in the south of Lebanon, have gone ahead and they've coordinated to test the Iranians, how far they're willing to go, what sort of response they're willing to issue. And then afterwards, Israel had to inevitably respond to Iran's missile attacks and vice versa. And this had to go back and forth for a little while. Both sides understood this going into it. It was very obvious. Neither side went and tried to inflict an enormous amount of casualties on the other. They hit strategic sites, they hit bases, they hit warehouses, but they didn't go after population centers, for example. They didn't go and try and conduct assassinations, which is, if you look at the Israeli strategy in the past, has always been the centerpiece of any Israeli attack against Iran. So my understanding of this is that this was fully coordinated. There is no way that the Israelis would have pulled off an attack like they did against Iran so quickly without coordination with the Trump administration. Those air defense systems, the THAAD air defense systems that are protecting the Israelis in Israeli airspace, are American air defense systems. The Jordanian air defense is American air defense. So this was fully coordinated, and anyone telling you otherwise is just simply lying to you, or they don't know what they're talking about. Which brings us to the next round of confrontation after the Israelis targeted different sites inside of Iran. And there's been a lot of dispute over what exactly happened and what transpired. So here again, we're starting with the Iranian footage that was released of them firing ballistic missiles towards Israeli military positions. Now, there, of course, in both rounds, by the way, like I showed in the first round of attacks, the Israelis claimed that there was no damage. The only damage that was caused was by debris and air defense munitions working and falling in different areas. They claimed that there was nothing done, nothing struck, 100% success rate, okay? And in this case as well, the same exact thing, but they announced it a bit too early. The Israeli media started announcing that all of the missiles were shot down way too early. And this wave of missile attacks, or there was a few of them that came, weren't as heavy from what we can see as the first wave of missile strikes against Israeli military positions in the north. And these targeted everywhere in the center of the country down to Bir Saba. And there were reports in local Israeli media of impact sites in both occupied Jerusalem near Beit Shemesh and also in Bir Saba, which is in the Naqab or the Negev area. So here again, you're seeing more footage of the Iranian missiles being fired. And this is the result. Again, keep in mind when you're watching this, this is one of the impacts in Itamar settlement, right? More accurately, it's an outpost, a settlement outpost, which I will show everyone on the map in just a moment. But this is a direct impact.
Wow! אמא, זה לא נגמר אבל! וואו! יא רבי! זה לא מצחיק! ממש לא מצחיק, הלכנו שלנו!
Just an observation here. Those settlers sort of sound like donkeys, but yeah. So Israel claimed, of course, initially, the Israeli media, everything was shot down, open areas, nothing was hit at all. And so this footage came out. This was the damage done, by the way, to a building in the settler outpost that was obviously not directly struck, but you can see the damage that was inflicted. And these ballistic missiles that Iran have been firing, the amount of damage that they cause, I mean, if you're within like a 250 meter radius of one of those impact sites, at the very least, your brains are going to be scrambled, and it's not going to look good for you. So there's extensive damage that's done to nearby settlement buildings. Now, a number of people, and we'll get to this as well, a number of people were pointing to the air defense fire and these little explosions here. If you can see these plumes of smoke come up, this is something that I really wanted to address. These are not successful interceptions of ballistic missiles. Those air defense munitions detonate by themselves in midair when they fail to intercept a target. That is not what an intercepted ballistic missile looks like. But there are so many people now on Telegram and Twitter and elsewhere that will post videos like this and claim that, there's, all of these ballistic missiles intercepted and that's their evidence of it. And to somebody that doesn't know anything about this, it may actually look convincing to them. And so you see this shared around, oh, look, there's 3 ballistic missiles that were intercepted there. And that's not what that actually looks like. But again, the Iranian target, and I'll show you on the map where this settlement is. It's actually located in the occupied West Bank near Nablus, the city of Nablus. So it's an illegal settlement. But specifically, this area was on a hilltop and a settler outpost. So the Israelis have actual established settlements, and these settlements are recognized by the Israeli government and officially aided and all of this. The settler outposts are not yet officially recognized by the Israeli government. So they sort of have like these more crude structures. They're still defended by the Israeli military, and the Israeli military is fully complicit in everything they're doing. And it tends to be the more extremist Israeli settlers that set up the outposts. I mean, amongst the Israeli settlers themselves, they're already extreme, but the more extremist ones go and set up their outposts on a hill. Now, what the Israelis do, and especially in Itamar settlement, they have these closed firing zones, and they're Israeli military sites, essentially. So in a lot of these areas, you'll have Iron Dome batteries or David Sling or whatever it may be that will be located near these settler outposts and on these hills in the settlements in the West Bank. And that is, my guess, is what Iran was trying to target here, and may have accurately hit maybe a radar site. It could have been a number of different things, what that was targeting there. But what we do know is that that was a direct hit. And the Israeli media attempted to cover this up and attempted to sell the public the idea that, this was debris that fell. Also, the Israeli media, when they were talking about the hit on Itamar, which again, is close to Nablus and is in the occupied West Bank here, they describe it as central Israel in the Israeli media, which we should take note of, because in the Israeli mind, this is central Israel. That's what they think, because this whole area is Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel. So they name it as such, and then they claim that, oh, our poor civilians that are in Itamar settlement, on top of Palestinian land, occupying the hills, guarded by a standing army. Oh, woe is us. Anyway, that being said, it's important to look at how this is being spun, and then also what the influential think tanks are actually saying about it as well. So the Times of Israel here, Trump says he had warned Netanyahu Israel could be left alone if it escalated fight against escalated Iran fights. So just to address that, this idea that Netanyahu is going to be left alone by Trump, and that Trump is exercising his power, and Trump is so angry at Netanyahu and is stopping him, and Netanyahu is having to lash out and push back, is all nonsense. We see this time and time again. We saw this early on during the Trump administration, when just before Trump attacked Yemen on behalf of the Israelis, which again doesn't serve US interests at all. And then he ran away after about a month and a half because they achieved nothing. And they don't even have any intelligence as to what they should be hitting in Yemen. Then again, the 12-day war, Trump used the diplomacy as a trick so that the Israelis had cover to launch their strike, triggering the June 12-day war in 2025. And right before that, as I showed in the last live stream here, the Israeli media went so far as to make up a whole myth that Trump was about to recognize the state of Palestine. And that's how bad the clash between the two of them had gotten. And then again, right before this flare-up, right before Netanyahu gives the order to attack Beirut and then attacks Tehran and Iranian cities directly, we're hearing all of this stuff. And now they're reverting back to it again, and they're telling us if Trump had power over Netanyahu in this scenario, Trump would want to get a deal, especially now the World Cup is coming up. He don't want to ruin the World Cup. If he had power over Netanyahu, then he'd just tell him to withdraw his troops from southern Lebanon, because there is no military solution in South Lebanon. It's not actually to the benefit of the Israelis. Their egos just cannot handle running away like they need to do, because that would be the smart thing. They've handed themselves over to Hezbollah. They've played into the strategy of Hezbollah. But the Trump administration can't tell Netanyahu even don't bomb Beirut to bring on Iranian strikes. The Trump administration cannot do anything by itself. It cannot negotiate on one tiny detail of a possible peace deal with Iran. This is the big issue that is stopping any deal from happening, by the way, the Lebanon front. And Donald Trump cannot put his foot down. If we're to believe these reports, these leaked reports, the best Trump can do is get on the phone and go, oh man, you're crazy. You're crazy. You need to not do this. Okay, you are the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the world. You cannot stop little Israel from invading southern Lebanon and bombing Beirut, at least bombing Beirut. But again, this myth is conjured up, and a lot of people in the US media contribute to it, criticizing Trump is abandoning Israel and all the rest of it. It is utter nonsense. And talking about nonsense, we're going to move on to the same subject here. Actually, before we do that, just going to show everyone what these the think tanks. So this is the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and along with the Foundation for Defensive Democracies, these are like the most hardline Zionist think tanks in DC that they played a large role in pushing the United States into the Iraq War. They're very influential in Washington amongst the neocons. And now look at what's being said. This is from today. Dennis Ross writes, a deal could leave Iran fatally weakened, which tells you everything, because just a week ago, this was not the message. A few weeks ago, this was not the message. They're actually changing their propaganda line to cope with the fact that they haven't been able to inflict a regime change in Iran, and it's a disaster. So here, like they're, again, the Foundation for Defensive Democracy defending Taiwan, major issue today, and they're just complaining about Hezbollah. They haven't got any solutions here. They've got nothing that they're offering. And the reason why I bring up the DC-based think tanks is because it's important to show that they don't have any solution for the current crisis. There is no solution that they have at all. You read through what they write. Of course, they're talking about, well, maybe a regime change could happen, in the future if we do X, Y, Z. They haven't got an actual answer, and they don't have any real policy positions. Here's one of the top Israeli think tanks, which is speaking about the connection that has just been formed between Iran and Lebanon and these two fronts. And so this is Raz Shemat, who is the director of the Iran and Shiite Axis program at the Institute for National Security Studies. So essentially what he's doing here is, although he's got some delusional takes within this piece, which you can read, this is the Hebrew translated version between Tehran and Beirut, Iran's growing commitment to Hezbollah. And they try and present this as if, for example, Hezbollah had to be convinced. In this article, he talks about how it took days for Iran to convince Hezbollah to get involved. And of course, they're just pulling this stuff, out of nowhere. They don't have a source for this at all. But they're sort of admitting here that there are massive issues that they can't confront. And this is this is the problem that they have. They're not offering anything solid as a way out. So they conclude with here, without having to go through this article for too long. However, Israel can take advantage of the challenges facing Iran and Hezbollah and the new opportunities that have arisen in Lebanon to disrupt the Iranian proxy strategy and promote long-term processes to strengthen the Lebanese state and weaken the Islamic Republic and Hezbollah, moves that may help weaken the connection between Iran and Lebanon. So what they're telling you there is that their strategy is failing. They haven't got anything. But lo and behold, they have one thing. One very influential thing that they can offer, and that is the so-called Lebanese government. So we're going to see what the Lebanese government is doing on this issue and what they have to say. And recently, the so-called president of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, gave an interview in which he addressed Iran and addressed Hezbollah. And we'll get into that and react to that in just a second.
It's not your country, it's our country. It's our obligation. It's not your job to interfere into our country.
He's speaking here about Iran, of course. He's addressing Iran.
I reject the statement totally, because our people being killed, our houses being destroyed. They are using Lebanon. Okay,
he's basically reacting here to the fact that Iran threatened to attack Israel, in response to bombing Beirut, and Iran wants a ceasefire in the entirety of Lebanon and an Israeli withdrawal, and rejects the Lebanon so-called ceasefire, the third one which was announced last week, which didn't hold for 15 seconds because it's irrelevant, and Joseph Aoun is irrelevant, and Nawaf Salam, the prime minister of Lebanon, again, is irrelevant to all of this. They're just US puppets and stooges. But here he is talking about, Iran is using Lebanon.
Our house is being destroyed. They are
our houses. Our houses are being destroyed. Whose houses are being destroyed? The people of the south, overwhelmingly, who support Hezbollah. The Shia. That's the majority of the houses who have been destroyed. Now, I'm not saying they don't target other sects. They do, absolutely. Christians have suffered greatly. The Druze have suffered. Sunni have suffered. I'm not saying that it's just the Shia who suffer in Lebanon. But the majority of the suffering, the majority of those who've been displaced because of Israeli strikes, the majority of those who have been killed in Israeli airstrikes, the majority of the peoples whose homes have been destroyed, entire towns erased from existence, are Shia who support Amal and Hezbollah. That is the political reality in Lebanon. And this donkey, who is a US puppet, is talking about our homes. Whose homes? Whose homes are you talking about? Our homes? What, the South doesn't exist? It's not part of Lebanon? We'll keep playing. It's frustrating to say the least.
They're using Lebanon as a bargaining chip in their negotiation with the United States. It's unacceptable. And here also, Hezbollah must understand that. Hezbollah must understand that no other way but to sit and talk. no other way to solve this problem and to save what's left except through negotiation and diplomacy.
Okay, this is his stance, that Iran is using Lebanon as a bargaining chip. Well, the concept, I don't know if he's smart enough to understand the concept of a bargaining chip, but normally a bargaining chip is you're using Lebanon. The argument he's making is you're using Lebanon to get something for Iran. How? That doesn't make any sense at all. In fact, if anything, the fact that Iran will not disconnect Lebanon in a ceasefire, a total ceasefire in Lebanon, and a withdrawal of Israeli forces from the south of the country is holding back a ceasefire from happening. Anyone with a brain can see that. But again, this is the argument of the US puppet. Like, he's been given these talking points because Nawaf Salam, the prime minister, also said the same thing. And they're talking about our houses are being destroyed, our this and blah, blah, blah. You know what else is happening? Because Joseph Aoun used to head the military in Lebanon. You know what else has been happening right after this statement was issued attacking Iran? Israeli strike kills Lebanese general amid war against Hezbollah. Okay, Israel bombed, right, a vehicle of the Lebanese army and killed 2 Lebanese army officers in the strike, a soldier and a general in the Lebanese army. Targeted assassination against the Lebanese army itself, which this donkey, Joseph Aoun, used to head. Yet he won't order his troops and will never order his troops to defend Lebanon, to retaliate against the Lebanese army attacks on, and this is not the first attack on the Lebanese army, right? And again, like this idea that they present, and I'm calling this person a donkey. I'm calling him a donkey because this argument is a stupid argument and is not a serious one that is being issued here. It's a talking point fed to him and fed to others in the Lebanese government by the United States. That's it. Nothing else to it. Because Joseph Aoun, we're talking about, who has the popular mandate and who actually represents the people of Lebanon. Hezbollah in the elections. Like, look, the elections in Lebanon, the way that the parliament is set up is it's 50-50, no matter what the actual number, and there's been no census done in Lebanon. And they prohibit a census being done to see the precise numbers and percentages of the different sects. It's largely understood that the Shia are actually the majority, the largest single sect. But the parliament is set up so it's 50% Muslim, 50% Christian. So all the Christian denominations on one side and all of the denominations considered Muslim on the other side. That's the split. Within this split, Hezbollah and the Amal movement and their allies have the most seats, the most votes, the most popularity. On the other side, the Free Patriotic Movement, which is one of the Christian movements, which has previously it worked with Hezbollah, lost and sort of had a massive setback in the last elections for a number of different reasons, which I won't get into. Right. But all of this is important to understand the situation right now in Lebanon. And when Joseph Aoun talks about our homes and blah, 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 and Iran using this, and Hezbollah doesn't represent us and all of the rest of it and the people of Lebanon, when they're talking about the people of Lebanon, it's very important to understand the way the system in Lebanon actually works. So the most recent elections were municipal elections, which Hezbollah won in a landslide, massive show-ups, right? But in terms of the actual, there's another movement, another Christian party, which is it's considerable in size, that took the position of the most seats in the Christian half of the parliament, which is called the Lebanese Forces, right? And they're headed by Samir Jaja. Now, the Lebanese forces have their history and their roots in fascist militias that were backed by the Israelis, even funded by the Saudis. And Samir Jaja himself is a convicted murderer who was later pardoned and got out of jail. And again, is a complete and utter puppet of the United States. Okay? But because the other Christian party that could work with Hezbollah performed very poorly in the elections, and the Lebanese forces, and again, they're not the majority of the country. They just got more votes in the election. That's all it means, okay? And they're a segment of society. They do exist, and they are there in Lebanon. People who believe in and are supportive of the Lebanese forces. They have militiamen and all sorts, okay? I'm not pretending they don't exist, but it's a portion, a small portion. Now, that portion and that result in the 2022 elections created a deadlock. Hezbollah and the opposition couldn't come to an agreement to form a government and to elect a prime minister and a president. And again, the prime minister and the president aren't directly elected by the people. So Joseph Aoun was the US pick. And Nawaf Salam was shipped in from the International Court of Justice, that was his role at the time, by the United States. Well, not directly by the United States, but he was the US pick, okay? Just so everyone knows, a Maronite Christian has to be the president of Lebanon, and the prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim, okay? So that is the configuration of the leadership. They were not directly elected. Nobody directly elected Joseph Aoun of the Lebanese people, like democratically elected, I mean, and Nawaf Salam. What happened is, after the war that ended on November 27 of 2024, after the war, Hezbollah was, of course, in a very compromised state. It had lost the majority of its military leadership and also political leadership, and its top leader, its Secretary General, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who was a very powerful political figure, not just in Lebanon, in the entire region. And so in the interest of keeping the country stable, Hezbollah made the decision, whether anyone disagrees or agrees with why they made the decision, they made the decision to allow the formation of a government and to allow Nawaf Salam and Joseph Aoun to take over. It was Hezbollah and the Amal movement which were against the government and against this sort of move and this leadership coming in initially, that after the war, in the interest of just stabilizing the situation in Lebanon and in a politically weakened state, they decided to allow them to come to power. Or else there would have been a deadlock, which continued. Now, that happened in February, I believe February 8th or one of those, in early February, that the government of Nawaf Salam was formed in Lebanon. All of this is very important for the idea of who represents the Lebanese people and all that. Lebanon is a country which has multiple sects and parties within those sects, which represent their people. That's just the way it is. Hezbollah is one of them. Amal is another one. Even the Lebanese forces is another one. The Free Patriotic Movement, right? There are many that represent different sects and sides in those sects inside of Lebanon, right? And they vote for them. These are political parties. They're active. Whether you hate them, whether you love them, it doesn't matter. That's the way it works there. So at this time, the so-called ceasefire, which started in November 27, 2024, Israel had committed itself to withdrawing from Lebanese territory around the time it was just after the government came to power and was passed and created in Lebanon. What did the Lebanese government do about the fact that Israel first delayed their withdrawal from Lebanese territory? They gave a bunch of excuses, and then they just never left. And then their priority straight away, they did it incrementally, how aggressive the Lebanese government got with this, by the way. But incrementally, they just pushed harder and harder to take Hezbollah's weapons, take the weapons of any group that's not the Lebanese army inside the country. The first proposal started coming through, and that was for, and I believe Joseph Aoun tried to gesture towards this, but was told absolutely not from the United States. Hezbollah has always accepted the idea, or for a long time has accepted and entertained the idea, that when their land is liberated, Or even there could be some agreement that can be done. They can merge together with the Lebanese army, and then they can fuse their weapons with the Lebanese army. So then the Lebanese army can be, they're just part of it, right? They are the army of Lebanon. They're part of it. They're under the state, and they have the weapons and the means to fight against the occupiers. The Lebanese army is not allowed to resist Israel. That's why there is a Hezbollah in the first place, because they're the only people that will resist. They did it for themselves in the south. The Lebanese government did not liberate the south of Lebanon in the year 2000. It was Hezbollah. That's who liberated Lebanon. It wasn't the Lebanese government that in 2022 forced the Israelis to back off and recognize their maritime borders. That was Hezbollah. They've done nothing for their sovereignty. They won't do anything for their sovereignty. And in talking about this popular mandate and the rest of it, it's nonsense. It's just nonsensical. It's a way to try and isolate an entire segment of the Lebanese population, to try and say that the Shia, or the people of the South in general, including the Christians and the Druze and everyone else, and people in the Beqa, which includes Sunni, everyone in Lebanon, they just don't exist if they're a certain part of Lebanon, if they're too poor for the liking of the elitists in Beirut, who bend over backwards to please the United States, or in some cases, maybe Saudi Arabia or France or any other country. And they talk about sovereignty. The US greenlights attacks on Beirut, including one that happened not too long ago, which killed over 300 people in 10 minutes. And yet, this Lebanese government has kicked out the Iranian ambassador, persona non grata, the Iranian ambassador. Talk about how Iran is violating our sovereignty. The United States greenlit the attacks, which now have killed almost going towards 4,000 people in Lebanon. And still, you're still expanding the embassy, military base, the US embassy inside of the country. There's no respect for sovereignty, nothing. Not at all. The second they got in, their goal was to disarm Hezbollah. They didn't care about forcing the Israelis to leave their country. The Israelis expanded their presence. The Israelis used chemical weapons in the south of Lebanon. The Israelis were doing airstrikes that did 15,400 violations of the ceasefire. Since the so-called ceasefire, which was imposed after the Iran temporary ceasefire, there's been 3,500 violations so far of that ceasefire by the Israelis, which doesn't matter because it's not a ceasefire anyway. Hezbollah has been responding the entire time. But in that 15-month period before Hezbollah started responding, there was nothing that came back from the Lebanese side. 15,400 violations of the ceasefire, hundreds of people killed in Lebanon, chemical weapons used against Lebanon. And the government was pursuing what? In August of 2025, after all these ceasefire violations and the killing of innocent people and the blowing up of homes and the expansion of Israeli military presence in the south of Lebanon, what happened? The Lebanese government passed through legislation to ban and outlaw Hezbollah's weapons, to go after Hezbollah. And again, that was because the US presented them with a plan to do it. Now, you can hate and despise Hezbollah, ML movement, whoever you want who's operating in Lebanon. It does not matter what your political view is, what you think of the situation. Objectively speaking, this is a government that works on behalf of the United States, not on Lebanese interests. There is no argument that it works in favor of Lebanese interests. None. It just doesn't exist, that argument. And that is where things stand here. And so Iran is now responding in the way that the Lebanese army should be responding to things like this. It should be the Lebanese army that responds to stuff like this, not Iran. That's true. That the Lebanese army should be the one retaliating when Israel kills its people. But again, the political circumstances don't allow for it. So that is the scenario that exists there. This is a tangent. We will get onto different issues. Of course, there's more to cover today. But I thought that is important to break that down, to break down what's going on in Lebanon, and the fact that the Lebanese government are being used to drive a wedge between the Lebanese people. Like the Israelis, for example, they threaten if Christian areas in Lebanon take in Shia who are fleeing their homes, the Israelis threaten to bomb. And what that is attempting to do is divide Christians from their neighbors. Not that they don't target Christians, of course they do. And so that's all happening. And the only state that has intervened, state, not non-state actors, the only state that's intervened to respond to Israel's aggression against Lebanon, not the Lebanese state, no orders, no condemnation, all this from Joseph Aoun. He didn't order anything, Iran did. Which is a sad state of affairs, but that is the truth. That's just exactly what is happening here. So, that being said, of course, there are a number of other developments. Yemen also got involved in what was going on. They got involved and coordinated an attack of their own with Iran. There's the footage that they released of them firing ballistic missiles. And Yemen has also announced that they have restarted their blockade in the Red Sea and closed Bab al-Mandab. But this is them firing their ballistic missiles towards targets in occupied Palestine. They say it was targeting Jaffa in occupied Palestine. There's a Philistine ballistic missile that they've designed. And so this was released by the Yemeni armed forces. And so Yemen has got involved, coordinated directly with Iran in this, and they are openly stating now that they will not end the blockade in the Red Sea, on Israel specifically, until the Israelis stop firing on Lebanon. So this is a real attempt by Iran to ensure that the Lebanon front is closed. And we're still seeing that despite all of this, and the threats came through as well. We're watching again, just the footage of them firing for their missiles here. And so just to address that, the Israelis said that they shot down the missile that was fired towards them by Ansar Allah. It's completely plausible that the missile was shot down. However, what we've seen is because Ansar Allah, or who are referred to in the Western corporate media, and even the Arabi media, to be honest, as the Houthis, which is not their name, but Ansar Allah, they want to delegitimize them, right? They don't want to recognize them and the fact that they have a government set up in Sana'a, right? They don't want to recognize that. So, the internationally recognized government is the one that was formed in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. That's the real government of Yemen, right? But the Houthi rebels that are a proxy of Iran, they are not the legitimate government of Yemen, even though they had like the majority of the armed forces come on their side. They're in the capital city, right? Like, you can hate them, you can hate their politics and everything they stand for. But just realistically, if there's one force, one power in the country that's actually a real government with a real army that represents the country, it's evidently them. But of course, internationally recognized for whatever the international community means at this point. They're not the internationally recognized government. Again, another tangent here. But the reports were that their missiles were all shot down. That's plausible. It is plausible. But what we saw is when Yemen was firing its ballistic missiles towards Israeli targets and its drones very frequently in support of Gaza, what would often happen is the Israelis, if they believed that missile, which their missiles are not quite as sophisticated as Iran's, that the missile was not going to hit, a target or a populated area, they would let it fall. In other cases, they just missed and they just covered it up because, like the censorship is insane that they impose on these events. So I haven't seen any evidence of them shooting down the Yemeni missile. And I assume the position that just an Israeli announcement that they've shot down a missile doesn't mean anything. That's the position that I take on that. It's plausible that they shot it down. It's a single missile that was fired, and there's no evidence of where it hit. But they did definitely fire in Tel Aviv, and now they are in very much in the equation, which wasn't the case during the 40-day war. So yeah, and this is the other development. Obviously, Bab al-Mandab is now closed for the Israelis, and the threat is that they will close it completely if the conflict escalates. And along with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, I mean, this is devastating. The impact is absolutely devastating. Just while we're at it, just a reminder, the Target stream is 100% viewer funded as a show. In the last 2 years, we were targeted and banned by PayPal, and our fundraisers were taken down by Indiegogo and GoFundMe. They even withheld our funds. So for the next 60 days, we are looking for 300 new members to keep this news show alive. You can join Mint Press on Patreon or right here on YouTube and join our membership program. Just a reminder there for everyone. Now, the next important development, this was, by the way, before we get to it, that was the amount of sirens that were triggered just by Ansar-Allah's missile alone. So it definitely reached or it got close to its target. Maybe it entered the atmosphere because it triggered a lot of sirens. And these sirens, you know, they disrupt the Israelis. So if only it's one missile, they expend air defense munitions. The Iranians didn't fire on Tel Aviv. That was the Yemeni armed forces that fired on Tel Aviv. So these air defense munitions are being fired. And at this point, Israel's air defenses are pretty drained. So this does work to drain their air defenses because they're actually concentrating their air defenses around different areas. They're conserving them to protect key targets, like valuable sites that they don't want the Iranians to hit, right? So that's why they're sort of conserving their munitions. And this works to expend some of those munitions. So it's actually something that is very beneficial. So that being said, we were talking about Lebanon and the developments that have been ongoing on the ground inside of Lebanon. And there has been a lot of footage that has been released since the last time we were on the live stream on Thursday. All of this footage you're going to see is from since our last live stream. And it shows you what's happening on the ground. So here, all of this footage, by the way, that's released since Thursday of the FPV drone attacks that Hezbollah has carried out against Israeli military positions. All of the footage has been from around Beaufort Castle area, which again, we've covered in a few of these live streams here. But the Israelis bragged massively about crossing the Litani River and seizing this area, this historic site. And as we're seeing here, their drones are having a field day. And there's been a lot of activity, especially in the area. All of these areas are above or beyond the Litani River. And again, they're just picking off the Israeli tanks and also going after soldier gatherings. And in the past week, Hezbollah has managed to target commanders in the Javati brigades and Shakid brigade battalion. And so they've actually been engaging in, here you go, see, direct hit down the turret. So these attacks that you're seeing here are being carried out round the clock, and there's a lot of them that have been concentrated in this area. And it's expanded beyond just the FPV drone attacks, but of course, they're very open. They've crossed the Litani River. They've, claimed that as bragging rights. And as you're seeing the drone right here, and into the back of the tank. And all of these areas, by the way, again, are around in close proximity to Beaufort Castle here. And what we've seen here, this is interesting, is that the munitions that they're using appear to have more sensitive warheads attached to them, so that there's a lower possibility of it getting caught and not detonating upon impact, because sometimes that can happen. Occasionally, it can get blocked and not detonate on its target. Again, strategically choosing their target. And you'll see later on in this video that this, again, a direct hit here, and the vehicle is on fire, because a lot of people, especially Israelis, like to get in the comment section and talk about how these drones don't do anything. And, when the Israeli media is admitting as such, but they don't do anything. We're not seeing what they do after they explode. And the reality is that there's enormous amount of evidence. You see how they hit the tracks here. See, not in all cases are Hezbollah going to completely destroy the vehicle. It's enough for them to simply use these cheap drones to damage a vehicle so that it is taken out of service. It needs to be repaired. And, the logistics behind that, all these vehicles being damaged and have to be towed out of Lebanese territory. In some cases, they'll just leave them. Here again, they're trying to hide this tank, trying to camouflage it, and it's not working. It's not working. They are trying to come up with solutions. They've even started training dogs to listen for the FPV drones. Again, hit after hit. And there's absolutely nothing that can be done about this. Round the clock. And we hear frequently throughout the day, or as the days go on, throughout the days, that there's another, what Israel calls a sensitive security incident, or serious security incident, which means an incident with casualties. And often what Israel does is Israel doesn't follow up on what happens to those casualties. And according to its casualty figures, there's well over, I think it's about 1,300 that have been injured in the fighting in Lebanon. And they admitted, the last I saw, that 70 of them were still in critical condition. I mean, how long have they been in critical condition? That's obviously an attack that you just saw there on a bulldozer. We're going through these quite quickly this week. There has been a lot, and again, we're able to see direct hits on the soldiers because, again, they're evacuating, and here comes the drone, and it is there to pick them off. And despite Israel reporting on some of these incidents, there's a lot of them where they simply do not report casualties. And of course, the FPV drones, here we go, the warhead that's sticking out there to make it more sensitive, it appears. But we don't hear any follow-up on what the Israeli casualties are, which is something to keep in mind. And again, even with the entrance of the vehicle there, they placed the fishing net, which they're using. And then to get around this, again, we're seeing the result of the hits on Israeli military vehicles. But to get around this, they're just making those warheads more sensitive so that if for some reason they get caught, then, and as you can see, it entered through the back there of that armored personnel carrier. There is a direct impact, and it penetrated it. So the Israelis are evidently hiding casualties, but even within that, they've admitted that there has been a great number, and on a daily basis, there are more soldiers that are announced having been killed and injured and seriously injured. And this is taking a real toll on the Israeli population and causing a lot of criticism of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Netanyahu will have to run into elections later this year. And at this moment, he's not doing too well. And one of the reasons why he's not doing very well is because Mr. Security, that he advertised himself domestically in front of an Israeli audience, is not able to achieve security for the northern settlements or anywhere. He said that we're going to win total victory in a 7-front war. And there hasn't been a victory on a single front, with the exception of perhaps the fall of the Syrian government previously, because there's no longer really a Syrian Arab army, and that the Israelis have been able to enter deeper into Syrian territory, seize more Syrian land. So perhaps there is a victory there, but I hesitate on even calling that a victory, because the reality is that things in Syria could very quickly get out of hand, and it's very unpredictable. It could go in any which direction. So I don't believe that the Syria story is yet over. There is a question mark over what the fate of Syria will be. But yes, at this time, Syria, is not an ally to Iran, very far from it. So it's not allowing the transport of weapons through in the exact same way. However, it might not be the quality of weapons, but the quantity of weapons appears to have actually increased in terms of what has gotten into the hands of Hezbollah. So that doesn't seem to be a major issue. But there may be a major issue that pops up if, for some reason, the new Syrian leadership is pushed by its U.S. allies to attack Lebanon. If that happens, that would be very serious. But apparently, the Syrian leadership has said it doesn't want to do that. Plus, I don't think they'd be very successful if they try to launch that sort of an assault on Lebanon. I think it would be not very beneficial to them, to say the least. And they could actually get other actors who come in the event that they do that. So it's not a very smart idea. That being said, that's not the only footage that has been released by Hezbollah. And again, as a disclaimer, we do this in every single episode. This is not an endorsement. This is simply for the viewers, educational purposes for the viewers of this stream, to show them what is going on the ground. And quite frankly, the corporate media hides this information and doesn't show it to anyone, which again is part of the propaganda war, is that the Western public are not actually seeing that there is a force fighting back and is effective against the Israeli military. They try to hide this from the view of the Western public. And because of social media, that's not working very well. But there's a number of different, again, this in the Beaufort Castle area. And this here is with a Cornet, originally Russian-made guided anti-tank missile. This was actually released today. This is from 4 days ago, though. And they're targeting an Israeli tank. And these ATGM attacks, by the way, the missiles that they're hitting these tanks with are a lot more effective than the FPV drones. So that sort of an attack, that's a tank kill. Looks like a tank from a distance, or it might be a military. Is it a tank or actually? I think in the video they said it was a tank. Regardless, that vehicle is toast. Here, this is nearby. This is not directly Beaufort Castle, though. And this is a rocket attack that was launched. And again, there's a series of different tactics that Hezbollah are employing. So they're not just launching rockets into northern Israeli settlements like Kiryat Shimona and these areas. They're also launching rockets at Israeli military positions in the south of Lebanon. So those soldiers constantly are coming under attack. They have to be on the move. If they're not on the move and they're camped out in one area for too long, they're going to get hit with these barrages of rockets. And the rockets, again, that we don't hear about the Israeli casualties that are being caused, or at least we don't hear very often about rockets causing Israeli soldier casualties. They just don't report it. And again, because there is no video of it, the Israelis and their military censor, they block it out and pretend that nothing ever happened. And there's quite a bit of evidence to suggest that there's been some serious incidents without the use of FPV drones, which they haven't properly reported. I mean, even the Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, his son was seriously wounded, and they said it was a light injury. And then we saw him on life support, basically, in the hospital afterwards. Here, again, is another variation of drone that Hezbollah uses. And by the way, this kind of drone that they're launching, and this is an Israeli soldier positions, this kind of drone that they're using was successful at hitting Netanyahu's personal home in near the Caesarea area. So this kind of drone, even though it's not unjammable like the FPVs, or at least the FPV drones that use the fiber optic cables, they're still very effective and very difficult for Israel to shoot down. And we've seen that proven time and time again. And so these sort of attacks, again, we don't have the video footage. They don't have a camera attached to the actual drone itself. So Israel will simply just try to ignore everything that's happening. And by the way, the Israelis themselves have footage of a lot of this stuff happening. They do, because they have their own, and this, just before we get on that, the Israelis have, GoPro cameras, they have body cams on them. So there's a lot of footage that exists, but Israel, of course, will never release it, of their soldiers falling into ambushes and their soldiers getting picked apart by these drones of different kinds, getting hit by rockets and fleeing and all sorts. The evacuation of the injured and the dead. They, of course, are not going to release that. But that footage exists. And we don't see barely any battle footage released by the Israelis. There's almost nothing they release. And if they had anything real to show us, close quarter clashes and going after Hezbollah and the supposed tunnels and all of the rest of this. And this is another thing, actually, before we get onto the missile that they launched. So Israel now is claiming that at Beaufort Castle, they discovered massive Hezbollah tunnels. This is a big propaganda talking point that they've come out with. Well, if they've discovered anything, that's because there were people there in the past using the area, like, for instance, the PLO. The Palestine Liberation Organization, when it was operating out of Lebanon and was fighting the Israelis, actually did use the area, right? And they fought for it. And the Israelis came in and they'd come in and capture it. But it was used in the past, right? So again, the Israelis will come and create fake victories. It's like, you, by entering this area, you've just made yourself exposed to all the drones that can come in. It's easier for Hezbollah to attack the Israelis when they're north of the Litani River as well, right? But especially when you're at like a high point. With these drones, it's just easy. It's very simple. So, they've turned their tanks into rolling coffins. Talking about that, Hezbollah targeted a barracks, an Israeli military barracks in the north, with a ballistic missile. So this is, again, like another development. Hezbollah doesn't actually give the name of this missile, the kind of missile that they used here. They didn't announce the name of it in the video. But they're firing these missiles at targets which are at pretty close range. And something to consider here, because this would have a rather large payload. that it would deliver to the Israeli military base. And of course, it's a guided missile. But Hezbollah has proven, and way back in 2024, even when part of their arsenal was hit by Israeli strikes, because the Israelis did manage to get part of Hezbollah's missile and drone arsenal. Now, the Israelis overblow it and give like a massive overestimate, but it's still a significant portion of their missiles and drones was impacted. And Hezbollah demonstrated at that time that it could, with ease, hit into the Naqab, along the Gaza border area. It could hit Ascalon, obviously Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, you name it. They could hit all over occupied Palestine. They demonstrated that they could do it with their missile capabilities. And they could hit buildings, high-rise buildings in Tel Aviv. But Hezbollah at this point, because of the equation that has been really created now by Iran, and it's a deterrence equation, Hezbollah, it's not in their interests in firing these missiles at Tel Aviv and Haifa into populated areas. Now, they can do that in retaliation for attacks against civilian centers in Lebanon. They have the capability. But the best possible case for Hezbollah is what's happening right now. They've drawn the Israeli army into the south of Lebanon, and it's asymmetric warfare. They're picking them off. They're damaging and destroying their tanks, their armored personnel carriers. They're taking out their Iron Dome batteries, at least 9 Iron Dome batteries taken out. They're attacking the operators of those systems, those air defense systems. They're hitting radar sites. They're killing and injuring large numbers of soldiers. They're making them fall back and withdraw from military positions that they'd established in South Lebanon. So they're making them bleed. They're making them move. They're making it costly for the Israelis. And that is the best way, that war of attrition, to bleed the Israelis. And this is textbook guerrilla warfare. And, it's not the same as in an army between two equal sides, right? Two modern armies. This is a guerrilla army using those tactics. Now, they do have the ballistic missile capabilities and they can hit. But what's the point? Because if this is their thinking, evidently, and this is why they haven't launched those attacks on Tel Aviv and Haifa like some people maybe expected them to do, despite having these capabilities. Because if they go and do that, Israel can answer whatever they throw times 10, and Israel doesn't care about how many civilians get killed. The more civilians get killed, the better, because look at what they did in Gaza. And even in Lebanon. They will commit large-scale massacres of the civilian population with absolutely no problem at all. And if Hezbollah uses its capabilities, which it can, to inflict blows on the Israelis, if it's going to do stuff like that, it needs to be strategic about it, not just lob missiles emotionally, and just for the sake of like hitting a building in Tel Aviv. When you can fight the Israeli military inside South Lebanon and drown them and cause enormous political problems and social problems for the Israelis as well. It's very clear what is happening here. And the Israelis have no answer, none. And now the backup, the one that can now hit Haifa and Tel Aviv and smash these military bases like just happened with Iran responding to attacking Beirut and established deterrence equations, is Iran. Iran is there to help them do that. And Israel, it's not as easy for them to just commit a civilian massacre in Iran as it is for them to do it in nearby Lebanon. The logistics surrounding striking Iran, the retaliatory measures that are going to be taken, fighting on multiple fronts, it drains resources. And it means that the Israeli Air Force as well cannot concentrate as much effort on the other fronts if it's fighting with Iran. And by the way, this is why the Israelis, you'll see that throughout the 40-day war that Israel and the United States launched against Iran, they didn't hit Yemen. They didn't bomb Yemen. And the reason for that is, number one, they have no intelligence. They have nothing in Yemen, evidently. They don't know what to hit. They don't know what to do at all, right? But they didn't want to just go and bomb, because Yemen, you're not going to achieve anything there. And it's such a long haul flight, waste of jet fuel. It's a nightmare to keep bombing Yemen continually. I'm not saying now they won't do it, because they have a bit more free space to do it. But bombing Yemen and bombing Iran at the same time is a waste in their eyes, right? To do that, because they're not going to achieve anything in Yemen. And Iran is the bigger threat to them, and a bigger strategic hurdle. So those are a few observations that I wanted to point out so that people are aware. And the Israeli media are sort of catching on to this. You see that this is in Ma'ariv, an Israeli newspaper. It's translated from Hebrew. They say Tehran has declared that the operation against Israel is over, and this is precisely where its problem begins, right? And so, obviously, this is a Israeli. It's all that they inject their propaganda into everything they write, but it's very obvious that they're being very critical right now of the Israeli government and the actions that it's taking, and that puts them in a very tough position where they're not able to achieve anything. Now, Iran has expanded its threats and said that it will respond in the event that Israel doesn't stop firing on the south of Lebanon as well. We'll see whether that equation actually comes to fruition, because Israel has issued evacuation orders in the city of Tyre here, or in Arabic, Sur. Another neighborhood was issued evacuation orders earlier, and the Israelis have continued to bombard it. So for now, it appears like the deterrence equation with Beirut, that has been imposed. The Iranians have put their foot down with this, and they have implemented it. There can be no doubt about that. The real question here is what comes next. If they impose the equation of South Lebanon for Iran responding in northern occupied Palestine, then perhaps the other fronts which Iran has discussed including will be included. For example, Gaza. So Khalil al-Hayya, who's the leader of Hamas, recently had a phone call with Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister. And it appears that from the communications between both sides, that Iran wants to include Gaza inside this equation, inside its deal with the United States. It wants the Gaza genocide to completely end. Today, there was another statement issued by Hamas, which seemed to communicate that this idea of the unity of fields, which was created under the leadership within the Iranian-led axis of resistance by Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the former Secretary General of Hezbollah. This idea of the unity of fields is very much in the rhetoric of Hamas and the other Palestinian groups now. And it appears from what they're saying that they are included in the Iran deal, right? That if Iran's war with the United States and Israel ends, it ends in Lebanon and it ends in Gaza as well. That seems to be what is being communicated here, which now, interestingly, because Israel has escalated its attacks on civilians inside Gaza recently, Israel shot itself in the foot again, because now the Israelis are in a position where Hamas might actually get involved and get more out of this conflict, especially if the next round happens over a longer period of time and the fighting is more intense. Ansarullah from Yemen basically was uninvolved, or it had a very minimal role during the 40-day war period. And now it's become way more involved. It's pulling that economic lever in Bab al-Mandab. And we're seeing at this point, the Iraqis are holding off, but they're issuing threats, and they can, of course, participate. Hezbollah are drowning the Israeli military in the south of Lebanon. And the Israelis have no exit strategy. They have no good strategy to deliver any sort of decisive blow or military victory. And they're taking it out on Gaza. And now Gaza seems to be getting more involved. And so they have shot themselves in the foot again by attacking Gaza more, because this puts more pressure on to include Gaza in an overall agreement. And if Israel, as suspected, won't allow an agreement, then there will have to be rounds and rounds of confrontation until the Israelis are forced to submit, or they are totally defeated. And that is where things stand. So again, it's that arrogance that won't allow them to leave this alone, because it failed. They haven't achieved regime change in Iran. They haven't destroyed Hezbollah. Their assassinations, even though they hurt their opposition, they haven't succeeded at securing strategic victories. So that's where everything stands at the moment. We wait for the next battle. We wait for the next escalation. And we will be here, evidently, to cover it on Thursday and, of course, next Monday as well. But catch us on Thursday. We will be back. Thank you to everyone who's been in here. Please do hit that like button, share this video, do subscribe and follow us, and add comments in the comment section. Tell us what you think, what you liked about this show. And also, just as a reminder, the target stream is 100% viewer funded. And in the last 2 years, we here at Mint Press News have been financially targeted and banned by PayPal, and our fundraisers were taken down by Indiegogo and GoFundMe. They even withheld our funds. So for the next 60 days, we are looking for 300 new members to keep this news show alive. And you can join Mint Press on Patreon or right here on YouTube and join our membership program. So thank you to everyone for being here today in this live stream. And again, we will be back on Thursday to cover the latest developments and be on top of everything that the corporate media simply will not cover or give you any in-depth coverage or context or anything about what's going on. So thank you to everyone, and we will see you again on Thursday.